Hi, Patrick here, Half Cheetah Will View, and we are here with another film review. That's right, we are back in action. So me, the Cheetah, it's sort of funny. Is it seems like recently that he and I have been looking toward our past. Some of the older movies that we've watched or I've watched, and I'm sharing it with him. Um, did my super ex girlfriend, and that was a lot of fun. And so. I was looking at the box and I was thinking, what else could we talk about? And I saw this laying there and I said, yeah, let's talk about this movie because I remember watching it when it came out to the theaters and I really, really enjoyed it. And the movie we're going to be talking about today is 1999's The Corruptor, starring Chow Yun Fat and Mark Wahlberg, Rick Young and Ben Victor. I think his name is Ben Victor. Ben Vic, yeah, Paul Ben Victor, and a very, very young Brian Mann. And I say that because I have seen Brian Mann's work before. It's actually one of the first reviews I did was a movie with Byron Mann, so it was a good memory. So the Corruptor, back in the late '90s, Chow Yun Fat had become a huge Hong Kong star, huge. He had worked with John Fu on many great films, and so the powers that be decided to try to break him in America, make him an American star. And the first movie they actually did with Chow Yun Fat in America was The Replacement Killers, which is another outstanding film. Uh, Action packed, starred Mia Servino, uh, and just Michael Rooker, Danny Trujillo, just a fantastic action film. And so The Corruptor was his second film that he did for an American audience. So the Replacement Killers got a pretty good reception, really good reception actually. And so they came back out with The Corruptor. Mark Wahlberg has his star is rising, and this movie was actually directed by James Foley, who also directed Mark Wahlberg in 1996's Fear. Uh, So he had already worked with Mark before, so he came and they worked on The Corruptor together. The Corruptor is a story about a lieutenant in the AGU, the Asian Gang Unit. Lieutenant Nick Chen he is a sort of a maverick, sort of a cowboy. He tries to keep peace in Chinatown, keep things settled, from getting completely out of hand. Um, but there's a gang warfare has broken out between a Tong led by Uncle Benny and a young a young gang called the Fukinese Dragon. Now these two are fighting for power. Uncle Benny and he has his lieutenant, his strong arm, so to speak, is a gentleman named Henry Lee. Uh, that is played by Rick Young. And so um, the movie opens up with a bombing. There's a bombing at a store, and it's one of Uncle Benny's place. And the Fukinese dragons come over. They pretty much wipe out everybody involved in it. So things are heating up in Chinatown, and at the same time, we meet Danny Wallace, a young detective who just transferred into the Asian gang unit. Of course, him being a white guy, that immediately gets a lot of laughter and derision from the rest of the unit. Um, so, he goes ahead and he does his job. He wants to be a detective, so this is what he's going to do. So that's what happens. So they're having a raid on during while Nick is a little skeptical of Danny. Uh, they work together, and during a firefight at a raid, um, Nick Chen saves Danny's life. Uh, and one of the reasons why Danny Wallace fits really well to AGU is because he knows the culture and he knows the language. He speaks fluent Chinese. So So he understands when Nick saves his life that he owes his life to Nick. Nick can do whatever with it with whatever he wants. Uh, so now Nick wants to go ahead and prove himself. So he goes ahead and he takes down he's talking to Nick and he says, I can help you, and so they proceed to take down a drug bust. And as they're doing this, they don't know what they don't know is that there's an undercover FBI agent involved in this. So they interrupt the FBI operation, and of course they're pissed off. And of course, but Danny and Nick, they had no idea. So anyway, they go ahead and battle the FBI. Now they have to battle the FBI, and they have to battle Uncle Benny, and they have to battle the Fukinese dragons. Well, what Danny doesn't know is that Nick is actually involved with Uncle Benny, and he's been sort of on Uncle Benny's hook for a while now. It has happened slowly over the years. Um, Nick he looks the other way, to Uncle Benny's businesses, and in turn, once in a while, they'll turn on Nick until a big bust from a rival or what have you, and that enables Nick to look really good in front of his superiors. In fact, we see him get an accommodation beginning in the film for a big bust, and that's just the way of Uncle Benny trying to trying to balance it out. Like, I don't want you messing with our operation, so I'm going to give you everybody else's information. So of course, this puts Nick in a really bad spot because now he's owned. He's been corrupted. So that happens. That's terrible. It's sort of sad actually. Uh, Danny happens to meet Henry Lee, and Henry Lee says, I want that young man to come work with you, helping us. And so uh, and Nick's trying to protect Danny from that, and so he says, "No, leave him alone. You got me. You don't need anybody else." But unfortunately, it comes to pass that where Henry Lee does need, he does get to Danny. He tells Danny about a group of immigrants that are being held, and they're being shipped in illegal immigrants. So Danny rescues about 40 of them, and he himself gets an accommodation for that. It was a good piece of police work because he got a tip. But Nick knows better. He's seen the pattern. He sort of knows what's going on, and it doesn't help out things that Danny's dad, who's a former cop, is also a compulsive gambler and has gotten himself involved with some very bad people. Um, so now that's why Danny's going to need a little bit of help too, because Danny's a cop, but he doesn't have a lot of money. So his dad is like, you know, so Henry puts his hooks deeper into Danny by helping Danny's dad after he gets beaten and put in the hospital. Henry puts his protection around him, saying that he's untouchable, and he gets him the best of hospital care. And he says, "This is what I can do for you." Uh, Danny's a little reluctant, obviously, because you don't want to be you don't want that happen to you, but unfortunately it does. So he agrees to help Henry Lee with some of his you know whatever he can do to basically become a younger version of Nick Chen. But the thing is, what Nick doesn't know, and neither does Henry Lee, or nor the FBI, nor 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 the precinct where Danny works at, is Danny is actually a member of the Internal Affairs Unit, and he is running an investigation on Nick Chen. Nobody knows in his precinct who he is or what he's doing there. They see him as just a young detective just cutting his teeth. Um, it isn't until the FBI gets involved with Danny that his Danny's superiors come in there and say he's working for us. And of course, the FBI thinks that they have Danny on the hook, but the IA steps in and says, "Not so fast." Um, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about IA after this too. Um, so anyway, Nick and Danny get into a really bad gunfight with these with two crooks, with a gang of killers. They come over and they've hit a rival's the I believe it was the the tong, and it hit the Fukinese, and but that leads to a really nasty car chase and gunfight in New York. Um, and it's violent as hell. They're trying to get away from they're trying to catch these two killers, and they blaze they're trying to get out of New York. They can't seem to get out of it. People getting hit left and right. It's just a clusterfuck of what it is. But it comes down to where Danny ends up saving Nick's life and returns the favor. So now they're back to even again. Even though Danny says, I just saved your life, so now your life is mine. But of course, they're even, and they're good partners. Um, so Nick thinks that the FBI is after Nick because Nick thinks the FBI is after Danny because of his hooks, because of his connections with Henry Lee. Ooh, Lord have mercy. Um, uh, they're each working separate. They're working together, but independently. Um, Danny is trying to gain information on Nick, and Nick is actually thinking he's getting information to free Danny, both from the FBI and from Henry Lee. So they're both working towards the same ends, but just on the opposite. But things come to a head is that after Uncle Benny is taken out of the picture and Henry Lee takes over the syndicate, is that he also finds out that Danny is internal affairs, and he tells Nick that he's after you, and so bring him over to the latest shipment because they're shipping another almost 200 illegals. Well, bring him into that to our offloading, and then you can kill him. Of course, Nick is really upset. He doesn't really know what to do. You seem to think that he doesn't know what to do, but he does. He's always known. And he gets there, and he's really hurt, and he's really pissed that he finds out that Danny's internal affairs. But Danny is telling him straight up, says, "You're a cop. You're a good cop, and I'm your partner." I mean, he knows what Nick's doing, and the methods he's using. Yeah, the connection with Henry Lee is not a good one, but Nick has done a lot more good in Chinatown than not, and Danny sees that. So they team up, and they team up again to take down Henry Lee. Unfortunately, Nick is mortally wounded, um, and he dies in Danny's arms. But Danny's final report says that Lieutenant Nick Chen, was an outstanding cop, and he was a clean cop. He covers everything for his partner, and he becomes a lot more wiser for it as well. All right. Um, so yeah, this is a really fun movie. A good movie. I wouldn't necessarily say fun. That's probably a misnomer. I would say this is a pretty exciting film for sure. Um, Nick Chow Yun Fat, just you can see why he's an international superstar. Mark Wahlberg, who was one of his earlier roles, he does a really nice job too as playing Danny Wallace. Um, the cast up and down is pretty damn strong. What really caught me when I saw this movie, I actually thought there was a Lethal Weapon connection. Because in Lethal Weapon, I think it's 4, there's a character played by the same actor, Kim Chan, who plays Uncle Benny. He also plays a character named Uncle Benny in Lethal Weapon. And when I first saw this movie, that's the first thing I saw when I was watching this was, oh, this is connected. I don't think it is, but it is a weird coincidence. Um, so Chow Yun Fat, like I said, he definitely this is definitely his movie. Um, Great, he comes off the Replacement Killers, which was exciting as hell, and comes in and does this movie as well. Um, Unfortunately, and this is a sad thing, is unfortunately, despite this movie being heavily hyped, and it was, it didn't make any money. In fact, it lost money. And and this is like the second and the biggest movie. They tried it one more time with Chow Yun Fat to make him to break him inside the American market, and that was with Bulletproof Monk. But they had a hard time breaking him in. Um, and that's a real shame because he's an outstanding actor. Of course, he went on to mega stardom when he did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. That movie seemed to break him open to American audiences far more than The Replacement Killers, Bulletproof Monk, and The Corruptor did. Um, the movie set in New York is directed by James Foley. James Foley is a great director, has a lot of hits underneath his belt. This was a surprise to read that this movie did not do that well because the movie was made beautifully. Um, I mean, James Foley has done some great films. He's done um, After Dark, My Sweet, Glengarry Glen Ross, which is, of course, written by David Mamet, won many, many awards. He did The Chamber. After this, he did Confidence, and he did the last two movies of the Darker Shades series, or I should say the 50 Shades movies. Sorry about that. Yeah, he directed the last two films of 50 Shades, 50 Shades Darker, 50 Shades Freed, and of course he did a Close Range. So he's like I said, he's got a lot of cachet underneath his belt, and he's got some good TV credits as well. Um, the movie was really good as far as the story goes. The story was actually pretty good. There was only one part of the movie where I had personally had a problem with, and that was actually probably the biggest set piece in the movie, and that was the car chase, where they were chasing down a car with two killers in it. Um, yeah, I just don't really buy the fact that they would just keep going after these guys after seeing what they're doing. The bad guys, in order to get away, they were shooting indiscriminately into the crowd. Whenever they would come to a crosswalk or a street connections, they would stop and shoot anywhere, anybody. I think, and that's the reason why cops don't do that anymore. If they get into a high risk pursuit, they tend to just break it off and come back and hopefully catch the guys later. But this is back in 1999, so who knows? But it didn't really feel authentic. You thinking that as soon as they would have got away, you might have chased them for a little bit, but once you saw that they're not going to give up and they're going to keep shooting at you, I think that most cops would have just like said, okay, you win this round, but we'll end up winning the war. Um, so that was probably the only part of it that I didn't like. And believe it or not, I actually thought they did a really decent job at treating internal affairs. Internal affairs, as you know, is the unit within major police departments that police their own. And of course, TV and cop shows have done their very best to absolutely positively vilify internal affair cops, which is really, really wrong. Because internal affair officers, they're the ones that keep the cops honest. They're the ones that investigate when cops go rogue and when they start shooting people in the back running away. It doesn't really help us, or this movie, if they were going to come back and treat Danny as just 100% like his dad does. His dad says, "Well, I may be a degenerate gambler and not a very good father, but at least I'm no I-8 rat." Well, you know what? I was like, listen, I was watching that scene and I was just like, Danny is going undercover to stop corruption because corruption is just like anything else. Once it gets its hooks into you, it's very, very hard to break out of it. And pretty soon, even with the best of intentions, like Nick had, sooner or later, it will come back and get you. It will come back and get you. you will be, it's like cops today. There's a lot of good cops out there, but there are a lot of bad cops, and a lot of those bad cops used to be good cops, and if they had been maybe stopped or identified, maybe steps could be taken to help them, to stop them before they ruin their lives, their careers. So I thought the performance by Mark Wahlberg as Danny Wallace as an Internal Affair cop, I actually thought it was pretty sympathetic, and really well written. And speaking of written, this movie was written by Robert Pucci, and uh, and I thought he did a nice job too. I thought his script was smart. He definitely knew the lay of the land as far as how Chinatown works and how the cultural aspects of it. I thought it was a really well written story. Yeah. Yeah, I would recommend The Corruptor all day long. Honestly, I would recommend this movie all day long. You might be able to find this one on secondary markets. It is an older movie. My copy is probably when it first got released. That's a flipper copy from Warner Brothers, but I'm sure they reissued this, so you can get this at any time, anywhere. Highly recommend it. There's some good special features on there, including director's commentary by James Foley. So yeah, uh, so that's my end of my review. I know 20 minutes, but I had a lot to say about it. So if you're new to the channel, consider hitting the sub button. Um, hit the notification bell, let you know whenever I drop a new review, and drop a comment. We'd love to hear from you. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace.